Okay, everyone, thank you for joining us for this video. I'm so excited today to be talking to Dr. Claire Kennan about her PhD and her PhD experience for all of you to see. Dr. Claire Kennan, she finished her PhD in 2018, and she now works at the University of Reading as the Heritage and Creativity Impact and Development Manager. She's here to talk about her PhD experience and some tips that she has for current or prospective PhD students. So thanks so much for joining us, Claire. Firstly, yes, of course. My first question, I can't possibly interview any current or past PhD students without asking a little bit about your PhD. So could you tell us briefly about your PhD, what it was about, etc.?
So my PhD is in medieval English history, and I look at parish guilds, so voluntary associations in the parish that ordinary men and women belong to, and that were used as a vehicle to express their devotion in ways that went above and beyond what was expected of them. My PhD focused on a small market town in Lincolnshire called Louth. Anyone who knows me knows that I will try and shoehorn that into every conversation about history I can.
I think that's what every PhD student does.
I know, you're doing that, you become an expert in your niche.
Yes, yes.
And the reason that I chose Louth was they had fantastic records, which can be quite difficult to find if you're looking at the medieval period. And also, it's home to one of the earliest Corpus Christi Guild dedications, which is super important. It's got the tallest medieval parish church spire, which the Guild helped to build. And it's also the starting place of the Lincolnshire Rising, which goes on to trigger the Pilgrimage of Grace, which is one of the biggest rebellions that Henry VIII faces. So it's a really, really interesting place, and I got to explore kind of the people who made up this association and how they managed the town and how they were involved in the daily running and the lives of the people there.
Yes. Can we expect any forthcoming monograph?
The proposal for the monograph is underway.
Oh, yeah?
And I do have a couple of chapters in edited volumes that are out, as well as a proposal for a new edited series that I'm working on with Dr. Emma Wells from University of York. So there's a few bits and pieces in the pipeline.
Wonderful. So everybody should look out for those then. Look up Dr. Claire Kennan on Google and see what you can find. Yes. So secondly, everyone's PhD experience is a bit different, of course. Can you talk to me a bit about what you found, for a dual question here, two parts. What did you find most encouraging or exciting in the course of doing your PhD, and what did you find most challenging?
So the most exciting thing was, I guess, the new opportunities and the new kind of discoveries that you can make. I think when you start a PhD, because you have to write your proposal for your supervisor or the funding body, you have a very clear idea of what you're going to do and what you might find. And your PhD often ends up completely different to what you expected, based on, I don't know, what you found in the archive or an experiment you were running if you're doing something sciencey. And that is really exciting. I found out so many exciting things that I wasn't expecting to just by trawling through the material in the archive. So that was really exciting. And because as part of your PhD, you need to make this original contribution to knowledge, which feels daunting at the start, it just makes you realise how much more there is out there to discover. Everyone thinks that, oh, history, haven't we learned it all yet? No, there's just so many documents that haven't been looked at properly, or that need to be looked at again, or haven't been discovered yet. So it's really exciting having those new discoveries. The most challenging thing, I think, is what I would call PhD guilt. You become very tied up in your own research, and your PhD topic almost merges with your personality. It's what you become known for. And I think if you spend any time away from your PhD, you can often feel really guilty that you should be working every hour of every day on your research, and you should only be thinking about really academic research-based things. And I found that quite hard, and I found it very hard to kind of separate myself from my PhD. So that's one of the big challenges that you can face. Yeah.
Cool. Well, that brings me on to my third question, and maybe I'm hoping you'll give us, as one of your tips that I'm about to ask you to give, how you dealt with that particular conundrum. But my third question is, if you could give a few words of advice for current or prospective PhD students, what would you want them to know?
So the first thing I would say, and this is advice that my supervisor gave me, Professor Nigel Saul, he was very, very strict on this, you need to start writing early. I think you need to do that to build your confidence, because it is scary and it's daunting, because you have, you know, upwards of 80,000 words to write. That's a lot. That seems scary.
Yeah.
And also it helps you to process your ideas and get them down onto the page. So we sort of had a plan where roughly every term I would submit between 8 and 10,000 words. Now, of course, not all of that made the final cut. A lot of it was rewritten in my write-up year, but it just meant that by the time I got to that 4th year, I had 90,000 words of stuff that I could go back and edit. And I think that's really, really important. So I would definitely start writing early and ask for feedback as well from your supervisor, from a peer. I had some very close friends who looked at my work. Just, you know, just start writing, because staring at a blank screen is just so debilitating. My second tip would be to demystify the process. I think PhDs are kind of quite mystical things. You don't really understand them unless you've done one. And there's almost kind of this weird secrecy around them and what they are and how they work. So one thing that I found really, really helpful was to completely demystify the process. So what is expected of a PhD in my discipline of history and then my subdiscipline of medieval history? Like, you know, what sort of things should I be focusing? What is expected? And also, what do you need to pass? Because, you know, that's really important. What are the actual, effectively the marking criteria? That's really helpful to know. And things like, well, how does a viva work? Everyone's always terrified of the viva. What is it? Talk to people, find out the kinds of things you might be asked and what you're expected to do. And I think demystifying the process makes it feel a lot less scary and intimidating. And if you can do that early on, it's really, really helpful. And then my third tip, which sort of deals with this PhD guilt and becoming merged with your PhD, is to keep up your non-PhD self. And that is really important. You need to take time off. You can't work like a machine. And you need to keep up those aspects of yourself that aren't related to your research. So for me, I'm a complete gym junkie. I made sure that I was still going to the gym 5 times a week, doing all my spinning and yoga. I'm also quite creative, so I made sure I make time for that. And, you know, just silly things, like you don't always have to be in this academic mindset. I love trash TV. Like, that is my downtime, and I'm not ashamed to say it. I love a good, or I should say a good bad period drama that's completely historically inaccurate, but it's enjoyable. And I think it's so important to like nurture that side of yourself as well, and like that's okay. And it's really important to try and take that time to do those things that just aren't related to your research, because otherwise it can become a bit too much.
Yes. Thank you, Claire. Those were fantastic tips. Particularly, I listened with great interest to your demystifying the PhD process. Given the channel that this video is on, it will hopefully help with that. And indeed, that brings me to the close of this video. I do hope you enjoyed this interview with Dr. Claire Kennan. Look her up for information about her historical, looking at Louth. Is that what the city?
Yeah.
Yep. Her publications, including her forthcoming edited books. I hope you found this video helpful. Please do subscribe to the Research Tips channel if you want to keep apprised of future videos, and look at other videos we have available for a bit more on demystifying the process, as Claire so eloquently put it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.